He entered the luxury boutique, confident, but after a few seconds he realized that here he was met not by his clothes, but by the color of his skin. He didn't know that this humiliation would be the beginning of an event that would change everything. At the end of the story, leave your opinion below, and don't forget to subscribe and we'll continue. The luxury jewelry boutique shone so brightly that even the walls seemed to be covered with the finest gold. The glossy floor reflected hundreds of chandelier lights hanging from the ceiling, and the air was fragrant with a subtle scent of expensive perfume. Behind the clear glass showcases rested high-stamp necklaces and watches that could dazzle not only with their beauty, but also with their price tag. In this place, wealth was a norm, and luxury was a prerequisite for respect. A man entered through the transparent doors, instantly attracting the attention of staff and customers. The man was James Walton, a dark-skinned loader who had recently finished a heavy shift at a grocery store on the outskirts of town. His work boots were covered in light dust from the cardboard boxes he'd been hauling all day, and his gray sweatshirt had a few stains. In his gaze was the quiet confidence of a man used to hard work and daily challenges. A few of the salesmen cast assessing glances at James, looking at each other with bewilderment. James didn't pay attention to it. He was used to such glances. Places like this always made him realize that he didn't fit the ideal image of a customer. He walked slowly along the display cases, scrutinizing the glittering jewelry, as if not noticing the quiet whispers and stares that accompanied his movements. A few seconds later, the manager, Benjamin Foster, a tall man in a perfectly fitting dark suit with a professional smile on his face that did not conceal a subtle dislike, hurried toward him from the far end of the room. "What can I do for you?" "I hear you have a new limited edition watch collection. I'd like to take a look." Benjamin looked James over from head to toe, emphasizing his contempt. "You see, sir," he began, stretching his words, "our clients prefer to make an appointment. The collection is very expensive and is intended only for regular customers. I'm afraid you're not likely to be interested in our merchandise." His words were polite, but the meaning as transparent as glass display cases. "You don't look like our customer, and you don't belong here." James glanced calmly at the clock on his phone, barely holding back the irritation that came with every situation like this. This wasn't the first time he'd been here. There had been hundreds of similar situations in his life where people judged him not by his accomplishments, but solely by the color of his skin and clothing. Though he was used to it, each such encounter left a bitter residue. "Well, I see. I thought money had no color or appearance." Benjamin didn't react to the remark, only waved his hand slightly, as if he wanted to end the unpleasant conversation as soon as possible. A few customers in the boutique were already watching, their curiosity overpowering their decorum. At that moment, the doors opened again, and another man, much younger than James, dressed in a perfectly ironed light-colored suit, carrying an expensive briefcase. Benjamin smiled, thinking he had a worthy customer, but he froze when he saw the new visitor walk right up to James, holding out his hand. "Sorry for the delay. Dad, there was a little traffic." Benjamin froze in place, his face instantly pale, his eyes confused. He shifted his gaze from James to the young man who had just entered, trying to realize his fatal mistake. "It's all right, Adam." James replied calmly, patting his son on the shoulder. "We were just talking." Adam, sensing the tension in his father's voice, shifted his gaze to Benjamin. His friendliness had changed to hardness, his voice cold and sharp as a blade. "It seems you've already met my father. I hope you've shown him the collection?" Benjamin froze, unable to utter a word. The vendors, who had previously pretended not to notice, were now watching openly, waiting for the outcome. "No, it didn't come to a collection." Adam nodded, looking at the manager with cold indignation. He stood motionless, realizing that he had just lost more than just a big deal. "I see," Adam said, turning to his father. "Then we'll find another place where people are treated with respect." Together they headed for the exit, leaving behind the boutique and a confused Benjamin, who was perhaps only now beginning to realize the cost of his actions. Soft daylight filtered through the glass doors of the boutique, illuminating Benjamin's confused face. His career had been built on his impeccable reputation and his ability to distinguish real customers from casual passers-by. But this time it was his own self-confidence that had let him down. He nervously adjusted the lapel of his expensive jacket and glanced at the younger salesman. He avoided eye contact, checking something on his tablet. Around him, the noise of whispering customers, whose curiosity could not be ignored, was gradually growing. One of the customers, a solid man in an expensive dark suit, frowned and said quietly to his wife, "Honey, you know he's right. I'm not sure I want to buy here after this either." Benjamin is not used to feeling helpless. Over the years, he had built up a confident image of a man who could instantly determine who was worthy of his attention and who was not. But now it all came crashing down in one fell swoop. And the worst part was that he knew he had only himself to blame. The figure of an elderly man with graying temples appeared from the back of the hall. It was the network's regional director, Mr. Jonathan Hale, who had arrived today for a checkup. His perfectly tailored suit and calm, cold confidence silenced the employees quickly. Hale took his time approaching Benjamin, giving him a hard stare. "Mr. Hale," Benjamin tried to put on a smile. "It was a slight misunderstanding. The director interrupted him by raising his hand, without saying a word. He nodded silently toward his office door, signaling that there would be no discussion. Benjamin felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He nodded silently and followed the principal, feeling dozens of stares escorting him to the door. Hale sat down at his desk, leisurely crossing his fingers and looking at Benjamin intently. "Do you want to explain what happened here?" Hale asked, his voice flat, without the slightest emotion, which made him even more nervous. Benjamin inhaled deeply, tried to maintain the remnants of his dignity. "Mr. Hale, this is just a misunderstanding. That's the problem. You think it's an excuse. The problem isn't who's related to him. The problem is your approach to people, Mr. Foster." Benjamin felt even worse. He wasn't used to someone talking to him like that. Usually he was the one who decided who was worthy of attention and who wasn't. But now the situation wasn't on his side, and that realization was becoming clearer. "Understand," Hale continued, lowering his voice to emphasize each word, "you didn't just reject a client. You publicly humiliated a person based solely on their appearance and skin color. Do you know what that can do to the reputation of an entire network?" Benjamin lowered his eyes. Now he realized how deep a hole he dug for himself. "I understand my mistake. I am ready to apologize immediately." "It's not about you apologizing. It's about you not changing after this conversation. You'll only change when you realize the real cost of your actions. As long as all you see is money and not people, the situation will repeat itself." Benjamin remained silent, feeling his career rapidly crumbling before his eyes. "I'll give you one chance. But remember, this is the first and last time. Tomorrow, you will personally apologize to Mr. Walton and his son. Otherwise, the consequences will be far more serious than just being fired." Benjamin swallowed, feeling it hard to breathe. He was grateful for at least a chance to make things right, even if it meant public humiliation. "I understand," he answered quietly. "I'll do as you say." Hale nodded indifferently, making a gesture with his hand to indicate that the conversation was over. When Benjamin walked back out into the hall, all eyes were still on him. But now he realized that this was only the beginning of his punishment, which would be a lesson not only for him, but for everyone who had witnessed the scene. Adam and Adam walked outside, and the tension that had been hanging over in the boutique slowly began to dissipate. Adam glanced at his father, who remained calm even though his son felt irritation and resentment for both of them. The sunlight illuminated the street, where the usual life of a big city was simmering. Adam inhaled deeply, exhaling the residue of negativity. He had experienced this kind of attitude many times before. People often judged him by his appearance, skin color, and clothes without giving him a chance to show who he really was. "I'm sorry you had to face this," Adam said as he opened his car door. He looked more upset than his father. The young man was used to dealing with problems quickly and harshly, but this time he held back. Adam put his hand on his son's shoulder, smiling calmly. "I haven't worried about that for a long time, son. It happens more often than you think. It's not what these people say that matters. It's how we react to it." Adam opened the car door, and they both settled inside. The luxury car they were getting into belonged to a company where Adam had recently gotten a good position. But that wasn't anything important to him right now. Far more important was a resentment for his father that he still couldn't let go of. You always say to take it easy, but is that normal? Why do they think they can afford to humiliate people for nothing? Adam glanced at his son, noticing the irritation simmering in his eyes. He knew that at times like this, it was important to channel his emotions, not just let them run wild. "It's not about us. It's about their own limitations," he said in a flat voice. "People judge because it's easier to do so than to think about who they are. It's easier for them to believe what they see than to recognize that reality may be different from their expectations." Adam was silent, comprehending what he had heard, then asked more calmly, "You could have just told him you had the money. Why didn't you do it right away?" "Because if a person needs to see money to show respect, then he is not worthy of my attention. Such people understand only the language of self-interest, not respect." The car started gently, and they drove out onto a busy highway. The lights of the evening city flickered around them, and the twilight gradually faded. Both of them were silent for a while, absorbed in their own thoughts. "So now we're going to go to another store?" "Yes," Adam nodded, smiling slightly. "Somewhere where we'll be judged on character and respect, not on how we look. Believe me, there are plenty of places where people care more about who you are than how much money you make or what color your skin is." Adam felt relieved. He was proud that his father had not broken under the pressure of prejudice. Today he had clearly seen the difference between those who respected only money and those who respected human beings. Now he firmly decided that he himself would choose those worthy of his attention and money by their actions, not by their appearance. The true value of a person cannot be measured by his bank account or clothes, but only by his deeds and dignity. When Adam left the cabin, the air inside seemed to grow thicker. The regional director, Mr. Jonathan Hale, looked at Benjamin with a stern look. The manager, who had recently been convinced that he was right, now felt like a schoolboy who had been publicly caught cheating. He realized that not only his reputation, but his entire career was at stake. Hale gestured for Benjamin to come into his office. On the way to his office, Benjamin felt the stares of employees and customers literally burning through him. Even the young salesman, who had been timidly silent before, now felt uncomfortable making eye contact with his boss. This moment was a painful lesson for all those who witnessed the scene of discrimination and did not have the courage to object. When the office door closed behind them, Hale took a seat behind the massive desk. He was silent for a few seconds, as if intentionally letting Benjamin feel the weight of the awkward silence. Finally he spoke, choosing each word carefully. "Mr. Foster, you obviously understand exactly why we're here. Your behavior is unacceptable and will have a very negative impact on the reputation of our entire brand." Benjamin tried to object, but the words stuck in his throat, as if squeezed by fear and shame. He realized for the first time how deeply the roots of his own prejudice had sprouted into his consciousness. He used to think that a client worthy of respect always looked expensive and presentable, but now his confidence was melting away, leaving behind only emptiness and regret. "Sir, I did make a mistake," Benjamin finally said quietly, gathering his last vestiges of dignity. "I'm prepared to apologize to Mr. Walton and his son personally to make things right." Hale leaned forward slightly, his gaze even more cold and piercing, his voice now sounding harsh and emphatic. "An apology is necessary, but it's not enough to make amends. I want you to understand the deep damage this approach to people does to your department. It is not just a loss of a major client, but much more serious things, discrimination and disrespect, which, alas, have become part of your way of working." The words made Benjamin shrink, as if something inside him had broken. He felt helpless in the face of just accusations that could not be hidden behind an expensive suit and a respectable position. Now he clearly realized that if he lost the respect of his clients and colleagues, he could lose everything he had worked hard to build over the years. Hale, noticing that his words had reached their destination, added quietly, "Tomorrow morning, Mr. Walton should receive a formal apology from you and an invitation to return to us, if he so desires. Otherwise," his voice became even more stern, "you'll have to look for work elsewhere." The next morning, the boutique was filled with an atmosphere of nervous anticipation and employee uncertainty. Benjamin stood at the front door, trying to hide his inner anxiety behind a carefully crafted mask of professionalism. Today, for the first time in years, he felt insecure surrounded by display cases filled with watches he had once considered status symbols. Now, as he looked around the room, he realized that yesterday he had made not just a mistake, but had displayed his own deep-seated prejudices. The door opened, and James Walton stepped confidently into the room, accompanied by his son Adam. This time Adam was not dressed in his work clothes, but in a simple but neat suit, which did not change his calm, somewhat aloof demeanor. His presence made the others freeze, for they all remembered the unpleasant incident of yesterday and were waiting to see how the situation would be resolved. Benjamin approached them first, inwardly tense but trying to maintain a semblance of confidence. He took a deep breath and looked James directly in the eye and said with emphatic politeness, "Mr. Walton, I want to sincerely apologize for my behavior yesterday. I realize I made a serious mistake in misjudging you." There was a pause, so palpable that it felt like you could touch it with your hands. James watched Benjamin carefully, studying every detail of his face, looking for signs of sincerity. Then he nodded slowly, allowing the manager to continue his speech. "I acted unworthily. My behavior was completely wrong, and I admit my mistake. I hope you will find it in you to give us a second chance and allow us to show that our boutique is capable of respecting every customer, no matter what they look like." These words sounded unaccustomedly sincere to Benjamin, who was used to masking his feelings behind arrogance. For the first time, he really realized the depth of his mistake, recognizing that the discrimination he had shown yesterday was unjustifiable. As James listened carefully to the apology, he realized that for the manager, it was not only an attempt to save his reputation, but a real moment of personal realization. "I appreciate what you're saying, but it's not just about what happened yesterday. It's an attitude that I've encountered more than once or twice before, part of a system where money is more important than people. And as long as that attitude exists, nothing will change." Benjamin felt how hard it was to breathe. James's words were simple and direct, but that was why they hurt more. He realized clearly for the first time that yesterday's incident was just the tip of the iceberg. His problem was deeper and more painful than he had realized. He now clearly realized that he had to change himself, or he would never be able to regain